The 10,079th meeting of the Security Council is called to order.
Russia has asked for the floor.
The provisional agenda for this meeting is non-proliferation. The agenda is adopted. The representative of the Russian Federation has asked for the floor. I give them the floor.
Mr. President, we have to take the floor for a point of order due to attempts by some delegations to push the Security Council into committing a gross violation of its decisions and procedures. Western colleagues are trying to pass today's meeting off as a regular biannual discussion under the non-proliferation agenda item to consider the implementation of Security Council Resolution 2231 and to discuss the relevant report of the UN Secretary-General. The Russian Federation categorically rejects such approaches. For those who are particularly forgetful, I'd like to remind you that all provisions of 2231 have ceased to be in effect since the 18th of October 2025, around the 10th anniversary of the day of the adoption of the JCPOA. On that day, the Security Council stopped its consideration of the Iranian nuclear program, and the non-proliferation agenda item was taken off the list of matters covered by the Security Council. These consensus-based decisions were enshrined in the text of 2231. References to procedures for removing items from the agenda of the Council that are enshrined in Presidential Note 507 are not relevant here. Along with the expiration of the validity of 2231, logically, the Presidential Note S 2016-44 has also lost its relevance, in compliance with which the UN Secretary-General every 6 months prepares a report on its implementation and the Security Council discusses it. Neither the Secretariat nor the UN Security Council have relevant mandates anymore, therefore. The unfelicitous attempts by Western members of the Security Council to create the impression that today's meeting is routine clearly demonstrates the fact that the current president have not managed to ensure the inclusion of this in the Security Council's programme of work for December 2025. Dear colleagues, the convening by the UK and France and its support team in the Security Council, the convening of this meeting, has nothing to do with the mandated reporting cycle of the Council. It is nothing more than a blatant attempt to convince the international community that the Euro Troika has harnessed a mechanism to restore the anti-Iranian resolutions of the Security Council. The so-called swap-back mechanism and Resolution 2231 apparently still remains in force. With their desire to push forward their agenda, they are prepared to deepen the divide in the Security Council, not only politically, but also on legal and procedural matters too. In this context, it is disappointing that our Slovenian colleagues were not able impartially to uphold their presidential obligations and prevent the holding of a non-existent meeting in terms of the Security Council's agenda. Their preparedness to act at the behest of the initiator of today's discussion is a flagrant violation of the decisions that the Security Council has previously taken upon itself and undermines its authority. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for his comments. The representative of China has asked for the floor. I give them the floor.
President, China supports Russia's position. I wish to point out that the snapback mechanism invoked by the E3 contains legal and procedural loopholes, and the Security Council has not reached consensus on whether the E3 has the authority to activate the mechanism. Resolution 2231 expired on October 18, and the Council had ceased its considerations on the Iranian nuclear issue. The Secretary-General should cease submitting further reports on the implementation of Resolution 2231. Certain countries are forcing Council meetings on issues that have been concluded. This serves only to undermine the authority of the Council resolutions, damage the Council unity, and exacerbate disagreements and differences. China expresses its grave concern about this. China calls on the Council members to earnestly implement the measures related to the termination date of Resolution 2231, uphold the Council authority and credibility of multilateral diplomacy, and create favorable conditions for political settlement of the Iranian nuclear issue. I thank you, President.
I thank the representative of China for his comments. The representative of the United Kingdom has asked for the floor. I give them the floor.
Thank you, President. We reject the points made just now by Russia and China. Today's meeting is fully in line with the decisions and procedure of this Council. The United Kingdom, alongside France and Germany, triggered the snapback procedure in full accordance with Security Council Resolution 2231. We did so because of Iran's significant non-performance of its commitments under the JCPOA. As Russia and China know, the snapback process completed on 28th of December 2025, and, as a result, Security Council Resolution 2231 remains in force and non-proliferation remains an agenda item for this Council. In addition, we note that 6 UN Security Council resolutions and UN sanctions have come back into force following snapback. It is essential that Iran and all UN member states comply with Security Council decisions. President, we urge that we should continue with today's meeting. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom for his comments. The representative of France has asked for the floor. I give them the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President. Almost 3 months ago, this Council carried out the snapback procedure aiming to reimpose international sanctions against Iran due to the repeated violation of Iran's commitments under the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. This procedure extended the application of Resolution 2231 of the Security Council, which would only expire if the Iranian nuclear issue should no longer need to be considered as resolved. This was conducted in accordance with paragraph 11 of Resolution 2231 of the Security Council. On the 28th of August, France, with its E3 partners, notified the Security Council of persistent failings and non-performance of Iran of its commitments, recalling the diplomatic efforts undertaken by the E3 since 2020 to remedy this. In the following 30 days after this notification, the Council, in a vote which cannot be contested, rejected a draft resolution on the permanent lifting of sanctions. This procedure led to the restoration on the 28th of September of the 6 resolutions adopted between 2006 and 2010 to constrain the Iranian nuclear program. The snapback procedure was also prevented the definitive extinction of the provisions of Resolution 2231. It should be recalled that the ending of the provisions of Resolution 2231 would only happen if assurances have been obtained as to the exclusively peaceful nature of the Iranian nuclear program. Resolution 2231 would remain in force, and France is in favor of the Security Council continuing the established practice of biannual meetings. Given the risk of the proliferation, this continues to justify the continued attention of this Council, and it should continue to be included on the Council's agenda. Thank you.
I thank the representative of France for his comment. I take note of the points raised by the Russian Federation, China, United Kingdom, and France. In accordance with Rule 37 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite the representatives of Germany and the Islamic Republic of Iran to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. In accordance with Rule 39 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite Ms. Rosemary DiCarlo, Under Secretary General for Political and Peacebuilding Affairs, to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. In accordance with Rule 39 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I also invite Ms. Hedda Hampson, Chargée d'Affaires of the Delegation of the European Union to the United Nations, to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of Item 2 of the agenda. I wish to draw the attention of Council members to document S/2025/814, 20th report of the Secretary General on the implementation of Security Council Resolution 2231. I now give the floor to Ms. Rosemary DiCarlo.
Mr. President, thank you for the opportunity to brief the Security Council on the implementation of Resolution 2231. As the Secretary General noted in the report before you, despite intensified diplomatic efforts during the second half of 2025, there was no agreement on the way forward regarding the Iran nuclear program. On 28 August 2025, France, Germany, and the United Kingdom, referred to as the E3 states, notified the Council of their intention to trigger the snapback mechanism of Resolution 2231. They attributed their decision to what they described as the significant non-performance by the Islamic Republic of Iran of its commitments under the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. In accordance with the snapback procedure, as the Council did not adopt a resolution to continue the termination of measures within 30 days from the E3 letter, the previously existing sanctions on the Islamic Republic of Iran were reapplied on 27 September 2025. This entailed reinstating the website of the 1737 Sanctions Committee and the corresponding sanctions list. Several member states rejected the validity and effect of the snapback process. Specifically, some members asserted that the process was procedurally and legally flawed. Member states also expressed differing viewpoints regarding the status of the resolution in the aftermath of 27 September. Mr. President, in the latest report of 12 November 2025, the International Atomic Energy Agency recalled that the Islamic Republic of Iran had stopped implementing its nuclear-related commitments under the JCPOA as of 20th February 2021. The agency was nevertheless still able to verify and monitor some of these commitments through activities implemented pursuant to Iran's NPT Safeguards Agreement. Specifically, the agency has verified that, during this period, Iran has exceeded the limits on its nuclear program as stipulated in the JCPOA. On 18 October 2025, the agency reported that it had no information on the status of the stockpiles of enriched uranium in Iran. The IAEA concluded that a commonly agreed framework with the support of countries concerned was necessary to ensure that Iran's nuclear program was exclusively peaceful. The agency also noted the readiness of its Director General to engage with Iran at the earliest opportunity to work constructively to this end. Turning to the remaining restrictive measures set out in Annex B to the Resolution 2231, namely those pertaining to nuclear activities and transfers, the Secretary did not receive any allegations of violations of these provisions during this reporting period. Furthermore, no new proposals have been submitted through the procurement channel during the reporting period. The Security Council did, however, receive 6 notifications regarding the nuclear-related restrictive measures for certain activities consistent with the JCPOA. Mr. President, notwithstanding the significant differences between the relevant parties on the way forward regarding Resolution 2231 and the JCPOA, all of them have continued to emphasize the importance of a diplomatic solution and expressed overall readiness to engage with each other for this purpose. Indeed, as the Secretary General has stated, a negotiated settlement that would secure the overall objectives of ensuring a peaceful Iranian nuclear program and providing sanctions relief is the best option available to the international community. The Secretariat remains at the full disposal of the parties in the pursuit of these objectives. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank Ms. DiCarlo for her briefing. I now give the floor to those council members who wish to make statements. I give the floor to the representative of the United States.
Thank you, Mr. President, for convening this meeting on Resolution 2231. And thank you to Undersecretary DiCarlo for your briefing. This Council is and should remain seized of the non-proliferation issue, especially with respect to the Islamic Republic of Iran. It is clear, as demonstrated by the issuance of the Secretary General's recent report on Resolution 2231, that, with the exception of paragraphs 7, 8, and 16 to 20, this resolution and its related practical arrangements remain in effect. Additionally, pursuant to the snapback process outlined in Resolution 2231, the Council decided to reinstate Resolutions 1696, 1737, 1747, 1803, 1835, and 1929. These resolutions are not arbitrary or punitive, but rather narrowly scoped to address a nuclear program that seeks to operate out of view of the international community and in continued non-compliance with its nuclear non-proliferation treaty mandated comprehensive safeguards agreement with the IAEA, as reaffirmed last month by the IAEA board. The reimposition of these proliferation-focused measures reflects the Council's long-standing concern, reaffirmed in its September 19th vote to restore these resolutions, about the Iranian nuclear file. As noted on the UN website, the 1737 Committee was immediately reestablished concurrent with the reinstatement of these resolutions. The United States will continue to work to ensure this committee is a fully functioning, active body. The United States continues to prefer a negotiated solution to this matter. Absent that solution, the Council must operationalize the 1737 Committee. Moreover, these resolutions, if implemented by member states in good faith, can constrain the space for potential escalation and uncertainty. The United States therefore urges its fellow members to support the expeditious implementation of the reinstated UN Security Council resolutions to realize their potential as a bulwark against insecurity. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the United States for the statement. I give the floor to the representative of Denmark.
Thank you, Mr. President. And let me also thank Undersecretary General DiCarlo for her briefing. Mr. President, as we have persistently underlined, Iran must never develop or acquire nuclear weapons. We have repeatedly expressed our concerns about Iran's nuclear trajectory and the fact that the IAEA is unable to provide assurances that the Iranian nuclear program is exclusively peaceful. We are also gravely concerned by Iran curtailing cooperation with the IAEA, who has lost continuity of knowledge and has for 6 months now been unable to provide information on the status or whereabouts of the enriched uranium stockpiles in Iran. This is deeply alarming. We see no credible civilian justification neither for hiding nor accumulating highly enriched uranium stockpiles. Mr. President, Denmark considers that Iran has been in non-compliance with its obligations since 2019. Numerous IAEA reports document this fact. As of 13 June 2025, Iran's enriched uranium stockpile was nearly 50 times the JCPOA limit. Iran had more than 450 kilograms of uranium enriched up to 60%. No other country without a nuclear weapons program enriches uranium to such levels and at such scale. Over the years, the E3 has vigorously worked for a diplomatic solution. Before the activation of the snapback, Iran was offered the opportunity to extend the provisions of Resolution 2231, provided Iran took steps to address 3 immediate concerns. 1, to show commitment to resume political negotiations. 2, to resume cooperation with the IAEA. And 3, to address issues relating to uranium enrichment and storage. Such steps from the Iranian side would have demonstrated willingness to comply with their obligations and to find a diplomatic solution. It would also have contributed to assure the international community that Iran's nuclear program is entirely peaceful. Iran, unfortunately, did not choose this path. Therefore, the E3's activation of the snapback was a last resort, which Denmark fully supported. Consequently, we call on Iran and all UN member states to fully comply with the 6 reinstated Security Council resolutions. Mr. President, we do not consider the snapback of sanctions and nuclear restrictions as the end of diplomacy. On the contrary, we believe that it brings us closer to the only durable solution to the Iran nuclear issue, which is one reached through diplomacy and dialogue. Denmark calls on Iran to return to the negotiation table and work towards an agreement that addresses the serious doubts about the nature of its nuclear program. Such negotiations will have to be based on reliable and impartial information on the status of Iran's nuclear program. We strongly urge Iran to return to full compliance with its legally binding safeguards obligations. Mr. President, to conclude, Denmark remains fully committed to achieving a durable, long-term, negotiated solution to address the Iranian nuclear issue, with the IAEA playing a vital role. We have supported efforts towards this goal, and we will continue to do so in the future. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Denmark for his statement. I now give the floor to the representative of France.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, President. I would like to thank USG Rosemary DiCarlo for her briefing on the biannual report of the Secretary General on Resolution 2231. In the continuation of our work in September and in the implementation by this Council of the snapback process, we take note of the elements of this report relating to the implementation of Resolution 2231, and we are pleased that no member of this Council formally objected to the presentation, which is important for us to be able to continue the work of the Security Council. I would also like to commend the participation in this meeting of the European Union, that is the coordinator of the Joint Commission of the Vienna Agreement on the Iranian nuclear file, as well as the representatives of Iran and Germany. Mr. President, I would have 2 comments to make. First of all, the lack of implementation by Iran of international obligations relating to its nuclear program constitutes a grave threat to international peace and security. In addition to the increasingly flagrant violations since 2019 by Iran of all of the limitations that can guarantee that its nuclear program is pursuing peaceful purposes, Iran has dramatically limited the IAEA's access to the nuclear facilities on its territory. For 6 months now, the IAEA has not had any access to the most sensitive sites of the Iranian nuclear program and has no way to verify the status of the 450 kilos of 60% high-enriched uranium held by Iran. If that were brought to military enrichment levels, that stockpile would, let us remember, be of a sufficient quantity to produce 10 nuclear explosive devices. Iran is also the only non-nuclear weapon state that is enriching to these levels. The agency therefore says today that it does not have continuity of knowledge over key aspects of the Iranian nuclear program, and thus that it is no longer able to guarantee its peaceful nature. The Board of Governors of the IAEA decided in November to renew the verification mandate of the IAEA in Iran under the resolutions reimposed following the snapback, and we call upon Iran to implement its safeguards obligations and to fully cooperate with the IAEA. Next, the reimposition of sanctions in no case indicates the end of efforts to find a diplomatic solution. The decision to trigger the snapback procedure was taken as a last resort after more than 5 years of diplomatic efforts aimed at getting Iran to respect its commitments, including a proposal to extend the term of the snapback, which Iran refused. The end of this procedure brings with it the re-entry into force of the resolutions of this Council on Iran, which includes an embargo on arms to and from Iran, as well as a suspension by Iran of its uranium enrichment activities, and it is incumbent upon all states to contribute to respect for these obligations in accordance with the Charter of the United Nations. We would also like to see the appointment of a chair of the 1737 committee responsible for monitoring the proper implementation of these measures and for the prompt appointment of the members of the panel of experts of that committee. We are determined to implement the resolutions that have been reimposed, and we remain fully committed to a negotiated solution. France's position and the position of its partners in the E3 has been constant for more than 20 years. Only a diplomatic solution can provide a viable response to the Iranian nuclear question. We therefore continue to call upon Iran to re-engage in serious negotiations and good faith negotiations in order to conclude a lasting and verifiable agreement that would guarantee to the international community that Iran will never acquire nuclear weapons. Thank you.
I thank the representative of France for the statement, and I give the floor to the representative of Greece.
Thank you, Mr. President, for convening this meeting, and I thank Under-Secretary General Di Carlo for her briefing. I would also like to welcome the presence of the representatives of the European Union, Germany, and Iran in the meeting. Mr. President, allow me to highlight the following points. First, Greece once again reiterates its unwavering commitment to the global nuclear non-proliferation regime with the International Atomic Energy Agency and the Non-Proliferation Treaty as its indispensable institutional cornerstones. Preserving and strengthening this regime is the only way forward for the region and the world. We therefore urge all states to comply fully with their obligations under the NPT. Second, we express serious concern regarding the findings of the IAEA Board of Governors' most recent report of November 12th, as well as the resolution adopted on November 20th. These make clear that the implementation of safeguards activities in Iran, in accordance with the NPT Safeguards Agreement, is indispensable and urgent and cannot be suspended under any circumstances. Echoing the IAEA, we urge Iran to extend full and prompt cooperation to the agency, including by providing the necessary information and access. Of equal concern is the steady increase in Iran's stockpile of highly enriched uranium, as well as the fact that its whereabouts are currently unknown. As of early summer, Iran's total stockpile had exceeded 9,200 kilograms in total, including more than 450 kilograms of uranium enriched up to 60%. There is no credible civilian justification for such a quantity of uranium enriched to this level. The international community must be reassured of the exclusively peaceful nature of Iran's nuclear program. In this regard, we note with deep concern of the AI's assessment that unless and until Iran assists the agency in resolving the outstanding issues, the agency will not be in a position to provide such assurance. Third, Greece continues to view a diplomatic solution based on the principles of the JCPOA as the best way to ensure that Iran can exercise its right to a nuclear program while guaranteeing that this program remains exclusively peaceful. It also remains the only viable pathway to sanctions relief, economic development, and regional de-escalation. It is in this spirit that we urge the initial parties to the JCPOA to resume talks without delay. Mr. President, with the credibility of the global non-proliferation architecture at stake and growing uncertainty threatening the stability of the Middle East, the time has long come for responsible action from all sides. We therefore call on all parties to demonstrate political will, engage meaningfully, and reaffirm their commitment to dialogue, diplomacy, and respect for international law, including their non-proliferation obligations. Greece will continue to advocate for de-escalation and for the doors of diplomacy and dialogue to remain open. The stakes are otherwise too high for regional and international peace and security. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Greece for the statement, and I give the floor to the representative of the Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Mr. President. I extend my gratitude to ESG Rosemary DiCarlo for her briefing. In the light of the continued operation of Resolution 2231 and the corresponding presidential note, the Republic of Korea has joined today's meeting call to receive the briefing on Secretary General's report. We also believe the Resolution 2231 clearly demonstrates that the Iranian nuclear issue remains on the Security Council's agenda. Allow me to briefly highlight the three priorities that we believe should guide the Council's work going forward. First, sustained dialogue and consultations within the Council are essential. Differences should be addressed through the discussions in the Council and its subsidiary bodies. The Secretariat has announced the resumption of the Iran Sanction Committee following the reinstatement of the Resolution 1737. We hope that an agreement on appointment of the chair will be reached promptly, enabling the committee to carry out its mandate effectively. Second, renewed diplomatic engagement is needed within and beyond the Council to achieve tangible progress. The JCPOA was the product of years of diplomacy. While there are still few signs of breakthroughs in the current impasse, we call on all stakeholders to intensify their efforts to re-engage and pursue dialogue toward a peaceful and diplomatic resolution. Third, the IAEA plays a central and indispensable role in verification and monitoring under the global non-proliferation regime. Its work on Iran's nuclear program is essential for confidence building and for any future political and diplomatic solution. As the international community is concerned over Iran's accumulation of its enriched uranium continue to grow, we urge Iran to resume full cooperation with the IAEA to ensure that its nuclear program is exclusively peaceful. Mr. President, at a time when dialogue and negotiations are essential to safeguarding the global non-proliferation regime, we regret that stalemate and confrontation persist. Reiterating entrenched positions without dialogue cannot lead a solution. Security Council discussions should serve as a facilitator for overcoming the current impasse. We urge all parties to renew efforts to identify common ground and advance meaningful progress. Before I conclude, I'd like to reaffirm our steadfast support for peaceful and diplomatic solution to the Iranian nuclear issue. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the Republic of Korea for the statement, and I give the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Under-Secretary General DiCarlo, for your briefing. We welcome the participation of the representatives of Iran, Germany, and the European Union in today's meeting. Today, I will focus first on the need for Iran to provide access to the International Atomic Energy Agency, then on our continued commitment to a diplomatic solution, and third, on the need for all member states to comply fully with Security Council resolutions. First, as has been reported today, Iran has restricted access for the International Atomic Energy Agency for over 6 months, including at the sites of greatest proliferation concern. This is despite the IAEA making clear that there is no technical or equipment-related reason preventing them from returning to the damaged sites. Iran's restrictions mean that the IAEA is unable to verify the location of Iran's enriched uranium stockpile. This includes over 400 kilograms of high enriched uranium, for which there is no credible civilian justification. We call on Iran urgently to lift its restrictions and fully cooperate with the IAEA in line with its legal obligations under the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Second, the United Kingdom remains committed to a diplomatic solution to address international concerns with Iran's nuclear program. We urge Iran to engage in direct talks with the US. The UK, alongside its E3 partners, stands ready to support a diplomatic solution. We are engaging with all interlocutors and continue to encourage both sides to return to the negotiating table. Future sanctions relief remains possible should Iran take concrete, verifiable, and durable steps to address international concern with its nuclear program. Third, we call on Iran and all member states to comply fully with Security Council decisions on Iran's nuclear program. As a result of Iran's significant non-performance of its JCPOA commitments, the United Kingdom, alongside France and Germany, triggered the snapback process in full accordance with Security Council Resolution 2231. This process completed on 28 September. As a result, Council Resolution 2231 remains in force, and the provisions of the 6 resolutions previously lifted have come back into effect. All UN member states should fully comply with the provisions of the relevant resolutions. We are particularly concerned by the suggestion from certain permanent council members that they will not do so. We reiterate the importance that all members of this council seek to maintain international peace and security. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom for the statement, and I give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Mr. President, once again, we would like to express our regret that you did not manage to find the courage impartially to uphold your obligations and not to act at the behest of those who insisted on holding a Security Council meeting on a non-existent agenda item. We categorically reject and condemn such actions by the Slovenian presidency, which undermine the authority of the Council and violate agreements previously reached. Another gross violation is the statement as a rapporteur by the representative of the EU. Along the JCPOA committee does not exist anymore, therefore the EU is not the coordinator anymore and therefore should not be allowed to brief the UN Security Council. Mr. President, nonetheless, it's very telling that you, neither in your role as President or as a Security Council facilitator on implementing Resolution 2231 before the 18th of October 2025, you didn't even attempt to start work on agreeing on a biannual coordinator's report or conduct a customary informal expert meeting of the Security Council in the 2231 format. We view that as a testament to the fact that our Slovenian colleague, despite their bloc solidarity, are in fact fully aware of the undoubted fallacious arguments about continuing the actions of Resolution 2231. Alas, today's briefing by the USG, Rosemary DiCarlo, once again has shown that not far behind Slovenia, we find the UN Secretariat's leadership, which has adopted a biased and legally shaky position regarding discussions in the Security Council on the Iranian nuclear program, as well as no longer being in force, that is Resolution 2231, the mandate of the UN Secretary General to monitor 2231's implementation is no longer pertinent as well. And we've talked about that. The unwarranted decision by the Secretary General, therefore, to prepare and publish a relevant report does not hold water. In this context, we are disappointed by other steps taken by the UN Secretariat, informing member states of the organization about the so-called restoration of the anti-Iranian resolutions of the Security Council in force up until 2015, and also the re-establishment of the website with the long-closed Security Council 1737 committee and its sanctions list. Such an encroachment into the area of sole prerogative of the Security Council and playing into the hands of its Western members is nothing more than a gross violation of the UN Charter. In particular, Article 100 states, in the performance of their duties, the Secretary General and the staff shall not seek or receive instructions from any government or any other authority external to the organization. Moreover, all of these actions by the Secretariat leadership are undermining not only the UN's authority but also international efforts to settle the situation regarding the Iranian nuclear program, in which the Secretary General, according to his own assurances, is so interested. We consider all of this totally unacceptable. Mr. President, in 2025, Western countries took their masks off once and for all regarding the settlement of the Iranian nuclear program. If anyone still had any doubts as to their real position, then these positions have been revealed now once and for all. At the start of this year, many of us pinned great hopes on the resumption of mediated contacts between Iran and the US on the nuclear issue. There were 5 rounds of indirect negotiations, and the parties agreed to meet for a 6th round. However, 2 days before that, Israel opted for a military escalation and struck Iranian territory, including civilian nuclear facilities that were under IAEA safeguards. A week later, Western Jerusalem was joined by the US in this misadventure. These actions not only threatened the security of the entire Middle East region, but also de facto wiped out the chances of achieving any agreement. Given this, the steps of the E3 to the JCPOA, the UK, France and Germany were the height of hypocrisy. These countries, despite their previous statements about the unacceptability of a military solution regarding the Iranian nuclear program, just turned on a dime and decided to support the strikes on a sovereign state. I'd like to quote what my UK colleague said in this chamber on the 22nd of June. Military action alone cannot bring a durable solution to concerns about Iran's nuclear program. In other words, London was prepared to view military strikes and threats as a lever to resolve the crisis regarding the Iranian nuclear program, thus fundamentally changing its position to please its older brother in just a few hours. Have a think, colleagues. This was an attack not only on Iran, but on the entire NPT architecture and the IAEA safeguards procedure underpinning it. The E3, the US, moreover, and other Western countries plumped for a direct warping of the report of the Director General of the IAEA, and not once, which never and in nowhere mentions any conversion of material into military purposes, any attempt to pin the blame on Tehran for these steps, which were taken purely in response to the unilateral withdrawal of the US when it withdrew from the nuclear deal in 2018, are doomed to failure and are just actions of amateurs. Anybody who knows the slightest bit about the topic perfectly understands that the NPT and the Comprehensive Safeguards Agreement does not impose upon states party to the treaty any restrictions on enriching uranium under the condition that this material be solely used for peaceful purposes. Over the past few months, it's become completely clear that the E3 is still a completely non-viable participant of the negotiation process. They initially sought to play the snapback card. The situation still was not to their liking. They were bothered by what our country and other member states in the international community put forward, namely convincing legal analyses explaining that the E3, through its numerous violations of the JCPOA and 2231, that the E3 forfeited its right to use the instruments stipulated therein. Furthermore, the so-called announcement about the launch of the snapback mechanism by our UK, French and German colleagues, which was conducted in complete circumvention of the JCPOA's procedures, in particularly not to use and exhaust the dispute resolution mechanism, was significant. Therefore, as any respectable lawyer can confirm, no assertions of the former European participants of the JCPOA can replace the reality, which does not restore the actions of the anti-Iranian resolutions of the Security Council. Then the E3 demonstrated its inability to take independent actions and decisions. The agreement that was taken on the sidelines of the UNGA high-level week between Iran and European countries on an interim solution came up against the US's position, which nullified its starting parameters and those of the E3. The E3 just pretended, however, that nothing happened. Even after this humiliation, the Europeans did not find enough courage to support the depoliticized Russian-Chinese draft resolution on a technical extension of Resolution 2231. This would have given additional time to find a negotiated solution without causing any legal vacuum after the JCPOA expired. Given this powerlessness, we are not surprised by the attempts of the UK, France and Germany with renewed vigour to try to convince everyone around them that this snapback indeed worked. However much our Western colleagues want to create their own parallel reality, the real situation does not give them any chance to do so. The restoration of the resolutions adopted in 2026 to 2015 is not viable. The term of 2231 expired on the 18th of October. The Iranian nuclear program is no longer a subject on the Security Council agenda. We should not forget that the aims of the previous sanctions resolution regarding Iran have been achieved, and this has been documented by the IAEA. In such circumstances, the previous restrictions are non-viable and cannot be used to eradicate any issues today in terms of the monitoring activity of the agency in the Islamic Republic, especially because these problems arose not because of Tehran, but because of the American-Israeli acts of aggression. All of these things further underscore the unviability of any assertions to or desire to establish the sanctions regime. Once again, we would urge our American and European colleagues and also the UN Secretariat to stop living in a world of illusion and to focus on avoiding these mistaken course. The Russian Federation will continue to hamper any attempts to continue to undermine the normal work of the Security Council or to call into question any decisions that have previously been taken or to mislead the international community. If the US and European countries and their allies really want to eradicate any doubts regarding the solely peaceful purposes of the Iranian nuclear program, they should take off their politicized glasses and stop exerting maximum pressure on Iraq and return to real dialogue with the country. Tehran has repeatedly demonstrated its preparedness to have a fair, balanced discussion and has named the parameters that are acceptable to it. Russia is prepared to assist any genuine attempts to find a political and diplomatic solution to this issue. We would urge all to focus on that and not to create castles in the sky or to talk about their phantom limb pains regarding Resolution 2231. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for the statement, and I give the floor to the representative of Somalia.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the outset, we would like to thank USG DiCarlo for her comprehensive briefing. We also welcome to this meeting the the permanent representatives of Iran, the Islamic Republic of Iran, and Germany, as well as the representative of the EU. My delegation takes note of the divergent perspectives among Council members regarding the causes of the current impasse. We underscore the primacy of the Charter of the United Nations and international law and encourage constructive, good faith engagement to preserve the Council's unity. My delegation believes that a balanced approach which addresses the concerns of all parties is essential to resolving the current situation. Somalia urges all stakeholders to recommit to dialogue and restraint and to refrain from actions that could escalate tensions or foreclose diplomatic space. We support the Secretary General's call to revitalize result-oriented diplomacy, including practical confidence-building measures that reduce mistrust, de-escalate tensions, and create the necessary conditions for sustained negotiations. Mr. President, my delegation reaffirms its firm commitment to the non-proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. At the same time, we reiterate the inalienable right of all states to the state parties to the Treaty of the Non-Proliferation of the Nuclear Weapons to develop research, production, and the use of nuclear energy for peaceful purposes without discrimination and in conformity with their obligations under the treaty. We once again call upon all relevant parties to engage constructively, refrain from actions that may undermine dialogue, and support mechanisms that facilitate practical, mutually acceptable solutions. To conclude, Mr. President, the international community must remain united in its effort for peaceful resolution to disputes and the preservation of non-proliferation regime. We call on all parties to redouble their diplomatic efforts to address outstanding issues in good faith and to work collectively toward a peaceful and sustained solution that enhances security for the region and for the world. Somalia stands ready to support initiatives that strengthen regional and global stability, uphold international law, and advance our shared objective of peace, security, and mutual respect. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Somalia for the statement, and I give the floor to the representative of Guyana.
Thank you, President. I thank Under-Secretary General Rosemary DiCarlo for presenting the 20th report of the Secretary General on the implementation of Resolution 2231. I also welcome the participation of the representatives of Iran, Germany, and the European Union in today's meeting. President, the Council's consideration of the Iranian nuclear issue this year has been of a complex and sensitive nature. There were moments of hope and moments of deadlock on the way forward. Unfortunately, the latter emerged stronger as the Council failed to agree on viable next steps. Guyana regrets that the concerned parties were unable to reach a negotiated agreement despite their stated commitment to finding a diplomatic solution. To this end, we continue to urge all parties to return to the negotiating table and to engage constructively and in good faith to find a sustainable solution. Guyana acknowledges the latest Secretary General report on the implementation of Resolution 2231. We took note of the divergent views concerning the parties' triggering of the snapback mechanism and the reimposition of sanctions on Iran. Guyana also acknowledges the recent IAEA report on NPT Safeguards Agreement with the Islamic Republic of Iran. In this regard, we regret the termination of the Cairo Agreement signed between the IAEA and Iran on the 9th of September 2025. This could have made critical steps towards facilitating safeguards implementation and ensuring the exclusively peaceful nature of the Iranian nuclear program. President, there is no substitute for a world free of nuclear weapons. This conviction underscores Guyana's commitment to the Non-Proliferation Treaty and our advocacy for the universalization of the Treaty for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. We view the proliferation of nuclear capabilities in any form as a fundamental threat to global peace and security. We implore all parties involved in the JCPOA to prioritize diplomatic re-engagement. The questions surrounding the reimposition of sanctions on Iran should be addressed in a comprehensive manner. There should be no humanitarian consequences for the population and a clear path leading back to the negotiating table. President, in conclusion, Guyana encourages dialogue among all concerned parties, continued cooperation between the IAEA and Iran, and the Council's prudent consideration of the Iranian nuclear issue. We believe that these efforts are vital for rebuilding confidence and trust and for delivering a solution that is acceptable to all parties. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Guyana for the statement, and I give the floor to the representative of Pakistan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thank USG Rosemary DiCarlo for the briefing. The Security Council last met on this issue in September, in the wake of unfortunate developments concerning the JCPOA snapback mechanism. Pakistan did not support the precipitate move to reimpose sanctions and cautioned against hasty action. Our position was grounded in the firm belief that all issues concerning Iran's nuclear program must be resolved through dialogue. More time should be provided for diplomacy to succeed, avoiding confrontation and preserving the framework of JCPOA till a successor arrangement is reached. It is deeply regrettable that in recent months, divisions in the Council and beyond have widened, taking us further away from the resolution of the issue. The situation had already become more complicated due to unilateral actions involving the use of force and violations of the UN Charter, and later due to the differing interpretations on invocation of the snapback mechanism. Mr. President, our position on this matter remains unchanged. We strongly believe that diplomacy and dialogue should be the guiding principles for the resolution of all outstanding issues concerning Iran's nuclear program in accordance with its rights, obligations, and responsibilities of all the parties concerned. We continue to believe that coercive measures would not help in bringing the parties closer and only exacerbate the trust deficit. Sanctions directly hurt ordinary people the most, impact trade, affect economic development, and diminish the prospects of regional connectivity. Pakistan has therefore consistently advocated the primacy of diplomatic engagement and the imperative of avoiding confrontation and conflict. Mr. President, even though the JCPOA was not implemented as intended, but the fact remains that it provided an essential framework for the resolution of the issue, one that is based on international law, mutual respect, and acceptance. The essence and basic framework of the JCPOA could still prove useful if there is a mutual desire to move forward in a spirit of compromise and accommodation. There is a need to revive the spirit of the JCPOA once more. The divisions on this issue could be overcome if we stick to the principle of bringing together all parties in a spirit of conciliation towards a solution-oriented approach. Most importantly, the trust and confidence in diplomatic engagement that was damaged in the past few months must be meticulously restored. The role of the International Atomic Energy Agency remains critically important as the international institution responsible for verifying compliance with the respective nuclear safeguards obligations of member states. The agency should fulfill this mandate in an objective, credible, and impartial manner, consistent with its technical nature, without any other consideration. Constructive efforts should be undertaken, including through the Security Council, to bring the parties together for a compromise acceptable to all. There is no alternative to continued diplomacy and dialogue for peaceful resolution of disputes. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Pakistan for the statement, and I give the floor to the representative of Sierra Leone.
Thank you, President. I thank USG Rosemary DiCarlo for her comprehensive briefing. We also welcome the participation of the representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran, Germany, and the European Union in this meeting. We acknowledge the work and recommendations of the Secretary General's report, the updates provided by the facilitator, and the activities of the Joint Commission. We view these as essential components in preserving the integrity of the resolution and in advancing effort towards a peaceful and rules-based resolution of the issue under review. Mr. President, Sierra Leone reiterates its principal commitment to the global non-proliferation regime and to the peaceful settlement of disputes. The continued implementation of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, as endorsed by Resolution 2231, remains an important benchmark for regional stability and international confidence in the non-proliferation architecture. We underscore the importance of full and verifiable compliance with the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and the associated safeguards administered by the International Atomic Energy Agency. These are vital to ensuring transparency, restoring trust, and preserving further erosion of the security framework within the region and beyond. We remain concerned by reported activities inconsistent with the commitments under the JCPOA. While mindful of the complex security dynamics and the broader geopolitical context, Sierra Leone believes that cooperative verification, transparency of enrichment levels, and restoration of monitoring mechanisms are indispensable. We welcome the 9 September 2025 agreement between Iran and the IAEA, facilitated by the Arab Republic of Egypt, as a constructive signal towards renewed cooperation. We encourage its full and effective implementation and urge all parties to support the IAEA's operational independence and unhindered access to sites as required by its mandate. Mr. President, we also take careful note of the recent deliberations of the Security Council in September 2025, including action on 2 draft resolutions. Sierra Leone values the engagement of all delegations involved and acknowledges the genuine efforts made to explore pathways toward under the framework of Resolution 2231. We continue to view such engagement as a positive expression of Council's responsibility to seek balanced, lawful, and peaceful outcomes. While recognizing the different views expressed during those consultations, Sierra Leone reiterates that diplomacy, dialogue, and good faith negotiations must remain the preferred means of advancing compliance and reinforcing regional stability. Any alternative approaches, including punitive measures, should be treated with caution and reserved only as a matter of last resort and strictly in accordance with the Charter of the United Nations. At the same time, we acknowledge the prevailing restraint by the parties concerned and the absence of further escalatory development since those discussions. These conditions, though fragile, represent an opportunity to reinvigorate effort toward peaceful settlement. Sierra Leone underscores the importance of preserving and building upon this window, however narrow, to pursue sustained, results-oriented diplomacy. We urge all parties to refrain from provocative rhetoric or actions that may jeopardize the current opening of engagement and reiterate the need for constructive dialogue that leads to time-bound, verifiable, and mutually reinforcing commitment. Mr. President, we commend the continued efforts of the IAEA in carrying out its mandate under the most challenging of circumstances. We call on all member states to support the agency, including through political and technical cooperation and prompt implementation of safeguards agreements. Sierra Leone further reaffirms the importance of preserving the space for all levels of diplomacy. We strongly encourage all parties to take concrete reciprocal steps to de-escalate tensions, re-establish confidence, and return to full implementation of agreed commitments. These steps must be based on measurable timelines, verifiable actions, and mutual respect for obligations undertaken. To conclude, Mr. President, Sierra Leone will continue to engage constructively with all Council members and stakeholders to support a credible and balanced process under Resolution 2231. We remain committed to upholding the authority of the Security Council, strengthening the global non-proliferation regime, and contributing to international peace and security through diplomacy and cooperation. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Sierra Leone for the statement, and I give the floor to the representative of China.
President, the JCPOA was once an important product of multilateral diplomacy endorsed by Security Council resolution As a model for dispute resolution through dialogue and consultation, balancing the objectives of nuclear non-proliferation and peaceful use, it has played a key role in maintaining peace and stability in the Middle East. However, in 2018, the U.S. unilaterally withdrew from the agreement, imposed unilateral sanctions on Iran, exerted maximum pressure, and this June, along with Israel, brazenly attacked Iranian nuclear facilities under IAEA safeguards and monitoring, pushing the Iranian nuclear issue into a deep crisis. After the U.S. withdrawal, the E3 also imposed unilateral sanctions on Iran, not fulfilling their obligations under the agreement or exhausting the dispute resolution mechanism, and triggering the snapback mechanism after the attack on Iranian nuclear facilities, resulting in repeated escalation of tensions and confrontations between parties. The current situation in Iran is not what any party wishes to see. If allowed to fester, it will further undermine the authority and effectiveness of the international non-proliferation regime and jeopardize peace and stability in the Middle East. China calls on all parties concerned to act with a greater sense of urgency, demonstrate responsibility, restart the negotiation process as soon as possible, strive to reach consensus and achieve results. I would like to make the following points. First, a political solution is the only way out. This issue cannot be resolved through force or confrontation. All parties should remain calm and exercise restraint, properly manage differences through diplomacy and dialogue, and avoid a return to the vicious cycle of sanctions, pressure, and escalation. The U.S. should fully fulfill its responsibilities, demonstrate political sincerity, clearly commit not to use force against Iran, and take the initiative to resume negotiations with Iran. The E3 should refrain from microphone diplomacy, play a positive role in easing tensions and bridging differences, and honor their commitment to a diplomatic solution. Second, upholding fairness and justice is a basic principle. Despite unfair treatment, Iran has repeatedly reaffirmed the peaceful nature of its nuclear program, emphasized that it had no intention of developing nuclear weapons, and has actively engaged with all parties to seek solutions. The experience of the JCPOA proves that the Iranian nuclear issue can be properly resolved through comprehensive and strict safeguards and monitoring. China calls on the countries concerned to objectively view the difficulties Iran faces in restoring safeguards and verification, and to value Iran's good faith and positive efforts, rather than making one-sided accusations, exerting pressure, and causing disruptions. Third, dialogue on an equal footing is the fundamental way forward. Any solution must fully respect Iran's legitimate rights as a state party to the NPT, a nuclear weapon state, and ensure the peaceful nature of its nuclear program. Parties concerned should respect each other's legitimate security concerns, ease tensions and build mutual trust through dialogue and an equal footing, and find an early solution that meets the expectations of the international community. A certain country should refrain from using the Iranian nuclear talks to advance its geopolitical agenda or linking the Iranian nuclear issue with other issues, as it will only disrupt the negotiation process and undermine diplomatic efforts. Fourth, a favorable atmosphere is essential. Recently, regional countries have been actively promoting the resumption of talks. China supports all efforts to restart negotiations and believes this is also the position of the vast majority of Council members. The Council should play a constructive role to allow time and space for diplomatic efforts and create a positive atmosphere for restarting negotiations. Relevant countries should stop escalating sanctions and inciting confrontation, and stop abusing the Council to impose unilateral punishment on Iran. President, as a permanent member of the Council and a party to the JCPOA, China has always played a constructive role on the Iranian nuclear issue, actively promoting peace through dialogue. For some time now, China has maintained close communication at various levels with all parties concerned, and has repeatedly sent letters to the UN and the IAEA to clarify its position and call for the maintenance of the political and diplomatic process. Together with Russia, China has proposed a draft resolution on the technical rollover of Security Council Resolution 2231. China will continue to work with all parties to promote the early resumption of negotiations, advance a political solution to the Iranian nuclear issue, uphold international nuclear non-proliferation regime, and promote peace and stability in the Middle East. I thank you, President.
I thank the representative of China for the statement, and I give the floor to the representative of Panama.
Gracias, señor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to thank Rosemary DiCarlo for her briefing on the report of the Secretary General. We welcome Izetta Sampson, the Chargé d'Affaires ad interim of the delegation of the European Union, and the representatives of the countries that are honoring us with their participation today. The 20th report of the Secretary General on the implementation of Resolution 2231, 2015 of the Security Council provides us with a summary of recent events which, in the context of growing geopolitical tensions surrounding developments in the nuclear program of the Islamic Republic of Iran, underscore the need to maintain constructive and sustained dialogue on this subject. It is worth stressing that around 20 years of negotiations made it possible to achieve what was one of the greatest diplomatic achievements of its time, and I'm referring to the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JCPOA, and subsequently Resolution 2231. That notwithstanding, there is still a lot of ground to cover in order to achieve an agreement that provides an understanding on security for all states. The lesson that we can learn is that there are no perfect agreements. However, the function of diplomatic management is to create the space necessary for building lasting consensus. Mr. President, the Republic of Panama remains firmly convinced that multilateralism is the appropriate tool in our globalized reality to achieve the consensus that is beneficial to the international system. Moreover, we feel that the Security Council should play a proactive and unifying role in this situation. We reiterate that the Non-Proliferation Treaty is the cornerstone underpinning this system, and through verification, it guarantees international confidence and stability. It is therefore essential to advocate for its full protection, its adequate implementation, and its strengthening. We express our concern over what we find in the report of the Secretary General, that the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, has stated that on the 18th of October 2025, it did not have information about the status of the low and high enriched uranium reserves in the Islamic Republic of Iran. In that context, there is a clear need to move towards a commonly agreed framework with the support of the interested countries that would make it possible to guarantee the exclusively peaceful nature of its nuclear program. In this regard, we reiterate our respectful call upon Iran to allow the verification and inspection of all of its nuclear facilities by the International Atomic Energy Agency in accordance with its international obligations, and also to immediately declare the status and the location of its enriched uranium reserves, which continues to be a source of major security concerns, without that needing to imply any risk to the security of same. It is essential that without delay, the outstanding questions relating to safeguards be resolved through effective cooperation with the International Atomic Energy Agency that would allow for the necessary access, the supply of clear information, and the application of the relevant verification mechanisms. If the IAEA is not able to provide guarantees as to the exclusively peaceful nature of the nuclear program, as well as the status and management of enriched uranium reserves, it will not be possible to consider that there has been full compliance with the international obligations that have been taken on in this regard. Colleagues, our system is facing significant challenges. However, it is our responsibility to address them to make sure that the mutual interest in security and stability prevails. We are facing a real and profound challenge of the progressive erosion of the multilateral system of collective security, with the weakening of normative frameworks, the loss of confidence, and non-compliance with international law threatening to undermine collective efforts for the sake of peace. This Council, in exercise of its primary responsibility for the maintenance of international peace and security, must facilitate a common understanding that would help reduce the risks of escalation, promote regional stability, and strengthen the international non-proliferation regime. Mr. President, we call upon all states to engage in genuine diplomatic efforts, free of pressure, with the aim of moving towards a solid and lasting agreement, and also guaranteeing effective monitoring by the relevant international entities. Moreover, we call upon states to use the influence that they have available to them to facilitate and support this process. This year's events make it plain that there are no military paths or shortcuts to stability. Only a genuine, inclusive, and sustained dialogue can provide a solution, which is why we are here today. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of Panama for the statement, and I give the floor to the representative of Algeria.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the outset, I would like to thank Undersecretary General Ms. Rosemary DiCarlo for her briefing. We also take note of the 20th report of the Secretary General on the implementation of Security Council Resolution 2231. We have listened carefully to the points of order raised, which highlight legal and procedural issues regarding the holding of this meeting. These points, if left unaddressed, could compromise the integrity of the Security Council's decisions and its unity as well as authority over a very complex file. Mr. President, Algeria has long advocated for the pacific settlement of disputes, for respect of international law, and for the primacy of dialogue over coercion. Guided by these principles, we have always recognized the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JCPOA, as a landmark achievement of multilateral diplomacy. Anchored in the NPT as the cornerstone of the nuclear non-proliferation regime, and strongly supporting the essential and independent verification role of the IAEA Resolution 2231 and the JCPOA effectively balance two complementary principles, Algeria firmly upholds an unwavering commitment to nuclear non-proliferation and the inalienable right of states to the peaceful use of nuclear energy. Regrettably, today we witness this historic achievement being endangered by a troubling cycle of actions and reactions. While the framework established by Resolution 2231 and the JCPOA had already endured severe setbacks over the years, the situation was dramatically aggravated by the targeting last June of several Iranian nuclear facilities under IAEA safeguards. This episode was followed by intense diplomatic pressure, which triggered the snapback mechanism. Consequently, the diplomatic path and the spirit of compromise that led to the Security Council's endorsement of the JCPOA in 2015 now appear more distant than ever. Mr. President, last September, Algeria called for providing more space and time for diplomacy and urged all parties to avoid any escalatory measures that could lead to unpredictable consequences in a region already tormented by so many tragedies. We believed then, as we believe now, that diplomacy and dialogue remain the only viable path to resolving this complex dossier. Our position has not changed. In this regard, Algeria wishes to highlight the following points. First, regarding the conflicting views of Resolution 2231, the Council could consider drawing upon the United Nations established legal mechanisms to provide an interpretation of the disputed provisions. Clarifying legal and procedural parameters could remove unnecessary layers of complexity from this dossier and avert a looming deadlock. Second, the commitment of all participants to a diplomatic solution is encouraging and must remain the sole foundation upon which any diplomatic solution must be built. To give substance to this commitment, we call on all parties to uphold the principles of good faith negotiations, mutual respect, and strict adherence to international obligations. Finally, Algeria calls for a renewed diplomatic approach that not only maintains open channels of communication, but actively explores all possible and complementary pathways, including impartial mediation to translate the parties' commitment to diplomacy into tangible reality. To conclude, Mr. President, the path forward lies not in the entrenchment of positions, but in a shared political will to restore trust and fulfill the commitments needed to achieve the comprehensive, long-term, and proper solution this Council originally endorsed. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Algeria for the statement. I shall now make a statement in my capacity as the representative of Slovenia. I wish to thank Under-Secretary General Di Carlo for her briefing. 10 years ago, the JCPOA established a robust regime that comprehensively addressed a pressing international security challenge. Unfortunately, this mutually beneficial arrangement suffered serious setbacks throughout the years. Slovenia regretted the US withdrawal and Iran's subsequent implementation of the so-called remedial measures. We have consistently called out Iran's unacceptable disregard for its obligations under JCPOA. Slovenia remains concerned about the scope and transparency of Iran's nuclear program. In its latest report, the IAEA stated that since mid-October, it has had no information on the status of the low and high-enriched uranium stockpiles, nor on whether nuclear material in Iran is being used exclusively for peaceful purposes. This situation undermines Iran's obligations under NPT. We call on Iran to fully implement its non-proliferation obligations and urge it to re-establish its cooperation with the IAEA, including by granting access to all nuclear sites and facilities. Colleagues, with the snapback reinstating sanctions on Iran this September, an era has come to a close. If we take a look at the 10 years of JCPOA implementation, we must acknowledge that it did not deliver the desired results. Nevertheless, it provided 10 years of enhanced transparency, 10 years of UN sanctions relief, and 10 years of multifaceted diplomatic and technical cooperation. In spite of all the hurdles the JCPOA faced, it delivered tangible results. The Iran nuclear deal remains one of the most significant diplomatic achievements of the past decade. It was a major accomplishment for the participants and a powerful demonstration of true multilateralism at work. Iran's nuclear program has, since its inception, carried significant implications for peace and security across the region. So would any new military interventions. In this regard, we urge all parties to show maximum restraint and recall that nuclear facilities should never be attacked. Iran, the wider region, and the international community need a long-term diplomatic solution with clearly defined objectives, obligations, and timelines. We therefore call on all sides to engage seriously and without preconditions in negotiating a solution that meaningfully restores JCPOA's overall objectives. I resume my function as President of the Council, and I give the floor to the representative of Germany.
Thank you, Mr. President, for convening this meeting on Resolution 2231. Like other delegations, I would like to thank Under-Secretary General Rosemary DiCarlo for the SG report and for her valuable briefing today. In September this year, this Council sent an important signal, a signal that Iran is held accountable for its continued severe non-compliance with the JCPOA. This underscored the unwavering resolve of the international community to uphold the integrity of the global nuclear non-proliferation architecture and to enforce the nuclear safeguards of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Mr. President, Germany and the E3 remain committed to pursuing a diplomatic solution in order to resolve the strong concerns about Iran's nuclear activities. And here I want to echo what my colleagues from France and the UK have said today in this meeting, and many others, by the way, and what my delegation has consistently said in many meetings in the Council on this matter, that our door remains open for dialogue. But in the meantime, we must focus on 3 points. First, the Security Council has to agree on a chair of the 1737 Sanctions Committee. The panel of experts must start working as soon as possible. The independent assessments are vital for transparency and effective monitoring of the reinstated restrictive measures which the Security Council has agreed upon. It is our conviction that the reinstated UN Security Council resolutions are not an end in themselves. They are tools, a tool to encourage constructive engagement and to create conditions for meaningful progress. For that matter, they need to be implemented comprehensively. Second, since the Council remains seized of the matter under UN Security Council Resolution 2231, we need to ensure that this threat to peace and security receives the necessary collective attention. The Council should therefore retain its established practice of semi-annual meetings. Third, we call on Iran to urgently resume full cooperation with the International Atomic Energy Agency. This is a legal requirement under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and Iran's Comprehensive Safeguards Agreement. We further call on Iran to re-engage in diplomacy in order to address the international community's concerns over its nuclear program. Because ultimately, and here I repeat what I said in the beginning, a comprehensive solution can only be established through dialogue. Mr. President, Germany, with its E3 partners, France and the United Kingdom, has been engaged in diplomacy with Iran over its nuclear program for more than 20 years. We will continue our diplomatic efforts to address all concerns associated with Iran's nuclear program, because it is and it remains in all of our interest that Iran does not obtain a nuclear weapon. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Germany for the statement, and I give the floor to the representative of the European Union.
Thank you for giving me the floor. I'm honored to address the Council today on behalf of the High Representative of the European Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Mrs. Kaja Kallas. I would like to thank Secretary General Antonio Guterres, USG DiCarlo, and the rest of the Secretariat for their work related to the implementation of Resolution 2231, as well as Slovenia for their efforts in carrying out the role of the facilitator of Resolution 2231. We take note of the 20th report of the Secretary General on the implementation of Resolution 2231. Mr. President, this session takes place in the context of the reinstatement by this Council of its resolutions in force prior to the JCPOA, and thus of all nuclear-related UN sanctions and restrictions on Iran. This followed the invoking of the snapback mechanism by France, Germany, and the UK, who notified the Security Council on the 28th of August of Iran's significant non-compliance with its commitments under the JCPOA. There should be no doubts on the validity of this process and on the obligation for all UN member states to fully implement the reinstated resolutions. However, the snapback of sanctions and nuclear restrictions must not be the end of diplomacy, quite the opposite. The European Union and its member states are convinced that a lasting solution to the Iranian nuclear issue can only be achieved through diplomacy. To this end, the European Union remains determined to continue to engage with all parties to find a negotiated and sustainable solution to the issue, in line with the reinstated Security Council resolutions. Mr. President, for the past 10 years, the JCPOA and Council Resolution 2231 established a framework that not only aimed to ensure that the Iranian program remains exclusively peaceful, but also put in place an effective monitoring and verification system conducted by the IAEA. The JCPOA represented a key contribution to the global nuclear non-proliferation architecture, as well as an achievement of multilateralism and nuclear diplomacy. Amid increasing challenges, the successive EU High Representatives have spared no effort to preserve this framework in the interest of international peace and security. High Representative Kaja Kallas has pursued intense diplomatic contacts, including during the 30-day timeframe foreseen in the snapback process, to avoid the situation we are currently facing. We welcome the efforts of a number of other states aiming to facilitate diplomacy. Ensuring that Iran does not acquire or develop a nuclear weapon remains a key security priority for the EU and all its member states, as it is for the entire international community. The EU reiterates its full support for the impartial role of the IAEA and for its Director General in their critical work to uphold the implementation of safeguards, nuclear safety and security, and to provide clarity on Iran's nuclear program. In November, IAEA DG Grossi reported that the agency had lost continuity of knowledge in relation to the previously declared inventories of nuclear material in Iran, including low and highly enriched uranium. Iran's implementation of its safeguards agreement cannot be suspended under any circumstances, and this situation is very concerning. The European Union calls on Iran to return to full compliance with its legal obligations under the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons and its binding comprehensive safeguards agreement. It is critical and urgent that Iran provide the IAEA with up-to-date and verifiable declarations on the quantity and whereabouts of nuclear material and related activities, and allow the resumption of inspections of all its nuclear facilities, including those affected by military strikes in June 2025. Mr. President, it's the intention of the High Representative to remain engaged with all relevant parties, including Iran, in support of political and diplomatic efforts to find a negotiated solution. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the European Union for the statement, and I give the floor to the representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Thank you. In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful, Mr. President, at the outset, I wish to state clearly Iran's position regarding the convening of this meeting. We associate ourselves with the position of the Russian and Chinese colleagues and firmly object to the convening of this meeting. Security Council Resolution 2231 contains a clear, deliberate, and self-executing termination clause. This resolution expired on 18 October 2025. As of that date, it ceased to have any legal effect or operative mandate. Accordingly, the Security Council rules under the Resolution 2231 came to a definitive end. There is therefore no mandate for the Secretary General to submit any report, no mandate for the Council to hold discussions on it, and no legal basis whatsoever to convene a meeting under the agenda item non-proliferation in this context. Any attempt to convene such a meeting constitute a clear violation and abuse of the Council's procedure. Likewise, any claim of the continued operation or implementation of Resolution 2231, whether by invoking Note 44 of the President of the Council or by vague reference to so-called established practice, is legally unfounded and misleading, and amounts to a clear abuse of this Council authority and process. Mr. President, I wish to express Iran's appreciation to China and the Russian Federation for their principled position and their faithful commitment to the JCPOA throughout its implementation. We also thank Algeria, Pakistan, and other Council members who have taken principled and independent positions. What we are witnessing is not a legitimate disagreement over interpretation, but a calculated distortion of Resolution 2231, the deliberate dissemination of disinformation regarding Iran's peaceful nuclear program, and a cynical attempt to abuse this Council for their narrow political interest. Against this backdrop, I wish to make 4 points. First, the root cause of the current situation are clear and did not emerge overnight or in isolation. They lie in the unilateral withdrawal of the United States from the JCPOA in 2018, the sustained and deliberate non-compliance of the 3 European countries with their commitments, and the subsequent military aggression by the United States and the Israeli regime against Iran's peaceful safeguard nuclear facilities. The war of the aggression launched by the United States and Israel, including deliberate attacks on facilities under IAEA safeguard, constitute a blatant violation of Article 2 of the UN Charter and the peremptory norm prohibiting the use of force, and represents a direct assault on the international non-proliferation regime. The situation is further aggravated by the explicit and public admission of the President of the United States, a permanent member of the Security Council and the depositary of the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, what Washington led, directed and coordinated this war of aggression. Any attempts to justify this unlawful act through a distorted interpretation of Article 51 of the Charter or by invoking a fabricated claim of imminent threat is legally unfounded, misleading, and constitute one of the most dangerous abuses of international law in recent history. Article 51 of the Charter permits self-defense only in response to an actual armed attack, not speculative or hypothetical threats. Equally disturbing is the silence, and in certain instances, the implicit endorsement of the 3 European countries in response to this act of aggression. They have no credibility whatsoever to invoke non-proliferation norms or to claim concerns for the integrity of the non-proliferation regime. Second, Iran has been a faithful and responsible party to the NPT since 1970. Iran has consistently rejected weapons of mass destruction on legal, moral, and doctrinal regard, a position reaffirmed constantly at the highest level. Despite unlawful sanction, sabotage, assassination of its nuclear scientists, and armed attack, Iran has never diverted its nuclear program to military purposes. Iran's program remains exclusively peaceful and subject to the most extensive verification regime applied to any non-nuclear weapon state. Yet the role has been deliberately reversed. The victim is treated as the perpetrator. Iran is punished, and those who attack IAEA safeguard nuclear facilities enjoy complete impunity. This blatant double standard gravely undermines the integrity, credibility, and authority of the global non-proliferation regime. Despite these circumstances and grave violations, Iran acts in good faith and continue to cooperate with IAEA. On 9 September in Cairo, Iran's foreign minister signed a memorandum of understanding with the IAEA Director General, an initiative welcomed by the agency and many states as a constructive first step. Additional proposals were later presented here in New York by Iran's foreign minister. All were ignored. France and the United Kingdom chose escalation over diplomacy, acting in alignment with Washington instructions while blocking genuine diplomatic affairs, including the responsible initiative put forward by China and Russia. Furthermore, they acted in a bad faith by ignoring Iran's constructive cooperation with IAEA, deliberately omitting key facts, and tabling another politically motivated resolution at the IAEA Board of Governors in November 2025, while pressuring members to support it. This was done to manufacture a crisis rather than resolve one, and it effectively ended both diplomacy and the Cairo Agreement. Third, regarding claims that the so-called snapback or reinstatement of termination sanctions resolution has been triggered, Iran's position is clear, consistent, and firmly on the record, including in its official communication to the Secretary General and the President of the Council. This position has also been explicitly shared by other members, including China and Russia. The E3 have been in sustained and publicly acknowledged significant non-performance since 2018, and therefore lack any legal standing to invoke such a mechanism. Moreover, the Security Council procedural inaction in September neither validate nor remedies this fundamental defect. The Council made no determination that legal conditions for the so-called snapback were met. Under international law, defective or invalid procedures cannot create legal rights or obligations. Let me state once again Iran's position in clearest possible terms. Resolution 2231 terminated definitively on 18 October 2025. As of that date, all nuclear-related provisions, measures, and restrictions were permanently terminated. The Security Council concluded its consideration of the Iranian nuclear issue, and the agenda item non-proliferation was removed. Any attempt by any state or body to revive, reinterpret, or enforce these terminated provisions is null and void, without legal effect, and constitute a clear abuse of this Council authority and processes. Fourth, Iran remains fully committed to principled diplomacy and genuine negotiations. It will never submit to coercion, intimidation, or political pressure. It is now incumbent upon France, the United Kingdom, and the United States to reverse course and take concrete, credible steps to restore trust and confidence. The core principles of the JCPOA remain indisputable and valid. Verifiable assurance that Iran's nuclear program is exclusively peaceful in exchange for full recognition of Iran's right under the NPT, including the right to uranium enrichment, the lifting of all sanctions, and the normalization of Iran's economy and integration into the international trading system. These principles remain entirely applicable and can provide a solid foundation for a new agreement. The essential objective is unchanged. Iran's nuclear program must remain exclusively peaceful, and Iran stands ready to provide such assurances. If France and the United Kingdom are sincere in their declared commitment to diplomacy, they should press the United States to follow this path. If they instead continue to adopt Washington's failed zero enrichment policy and deny Iran in unalienable right under the NPT, diplomacy will be effectively destroyed. The selective invocation of the UN Charter and the pursuit of the so-called peace zero strength approach only undermine the rule of law, replacing it with the law of the jungle. In closing, Mr. President, I wish to thank the outgoing members of the Council, Algeria, Guyana, and the Republic of Korea, Sierra Leone, and Slovenia, and congratulate them on the successful completion of their two-year term. I would like to commend in particular Algeria and Guyana for their principled and independent conduct throughout their tenure. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the Islamic Republic Iran for the statements and also for the nice words addressed to the outgoing members of the Council. The representative of the United States has asked for the floor to make further statement. Please.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. There's a couple things that I wanted to address in the statements from the Iranian representative just now, especially firstly as it relates to 2231 and if it is still active. The resolution did not expire with the conclusion of the snapback process, nor the original termination day of October 18th. Our focus, however, the United States of America focus,
is on the more relevant and comprehensive restrictions that need to be reinstated in the UNSCR. So we wanted to make that clear on 2231. Also, since you decided to address the President of the United States, would like to make it clear to the entire world that the United States remains available for formal talks with Iran, but only if Tehran is prepared for direct and meaningful dialogue. Direct and meaningful. We're not going to negotiate in public, of course, not here. We have been clear, however, about certain expectations for any arrangement. Foremost, there can be no enrichment inside of Iran, and that remains our principle. I've worked for President Trump in 2 administrations now, and I can tell you, in both administrations, President Trump extended the hand of diplomacy to Iran. But instead of taking that hand of diplomacy, you continue to put your hand in the fire. Step away from the fire, sir, and take President Trump's hand of diplomacy. It's extended to you.
I thank the representative of the United States for the statement. There are no more names inscribed on the list of speakers. Sorry? Okay. The representative of France has asked for the floor to make further statement. I give them the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I will be brief. I wanted to take the floor once again, France, to reiterate 3 points. The first point has already been said, but I want to repeat it nonetheless. It is very clear that, given the vote in September in this Council, the item is still on the Security Council's agenda, and it is within the remit of the Security Council to continue to consider this question. My second point, listening to what was said by the representative of Iran, I'm struck by 2 points. Firstly, disinformation is at the heart of what we've just heard. There's no intention to coerce on behalf of the E3, to coerce Iran. Once again, we have shown in the past and recently in September our resolve to find a diplomatic, negotiated solution. It's up to Iran to show the peaceful nature of its nuclear program, as the IAEA is calling for and has called for repeatedly for some years now, and has done so recently in the autumn. We are not exerting any pressure, so we're not going over and beyond that request to cooperate with the IAEA sustainably and in good faith. We also expect that Iran, during these meetings, comment on a number of facts that are in the IAEA reports and are taken up again in the Secretary General's report on the implementation of 2231. I'd like to say that France is very disappointed to have heard no substantial responses regarding the Secretary General's report. Thank you.
I thank representative of France for the statement. The representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran has asked for the floor. I give them the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And I think that, as mentioned, the representative of the United States, we appreciate any fair and meaningful negotiation, but insisting on zero enrichment policy, it is contrary to our rights as a member of the NPT. And it means that they are not pursuing the fair negotiation. They want to dictate their predetermined intention on Iran. Iran will not bow down to any pressure and intimidation, and we are not going to blackmail to the body in international field. Thank you.
I thank representative of Islamic Republic of Iran for the statement. Representative of Russian Federation has asked for the floor to make further statement. I give him the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll be very brief, replying to what has been just said by a representative of France. I said it in my statement when I spoke, and I would like to repeat it. You failed miserably in your so-called diplomatic efforts to strike a deal on the nuclear issue with Iran, and you know it. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for the statement. There are no more names inscribed on the list of speakers. The meeting is adjourned.